The other thing that comes to mind is the issue of peaceable assembly as I'm continuing to talk about the First Amendment. And having been present and actually broken the story nationally when the police were called to the 5th District Congressman Perriello's office back in July because somebody didn't like the fact that people were protesting there, the story has continued because the police were called on several more instances until very recently the police were called and they were told to inform people, if you are here in front of the congressman's office, you will be arrested. You need to leave now. Now, who made that decision? Well, I put in a FOIA request to the city government to find out who made that decision, and it's very unclear from the emails I received back, but we were told that it was the Commonwealth's attorney, Warner David Chapman, who ultimately made that decision. And so what happened as a result? Well, I love what happened because the Rutherford Institute got involved. And you know them as one of the preeminent civil liberties organizations in America that does protect free speech and First Amendment issues in particular. And they sent a letter to Congressman Perriello telling him what essentially the same thing that I said back in July was, if your office is located in a place where people are not able to protest, then you just need to move your office. And yet there was no response from the congressman. And so last night, the word came out that Keith Olbermann, who many of you will recognize as a nationally known television talk show host, Keith Olbermann came out and awarded John Whitehead, the president of the Rutherford Institute, what he called the Worst Person in the World award. The worst person in the world is one who is standing up for the First Amendment and telling a congressman he needs to move his office. And of course, John Whitehead had a good response. He asked if there was a plaque or an award to go along with that presentation. So he's waiting for Keith Olbermann to deliver. But that's what's happening here in America today, and many people think that this is just normal, and this is something that we need to live with. And it's why I always go back to the schools. It's why I always go back to the schools. As I have exposed on the show before, the sort of indoctrination that's going on in Albemarle County and Charlottesville schools should be troubling to everybody. And we have to wonder what it is that kids are learning in these classrooms about the function of government. And I'm very afraid, as I've said before, that what is being taught in the schools is a declaration of dependence, so that people come forward expecting that they will depend upon the government. And that's part of the big plan. So I guess I want to conclude my remarks by saying there's several things that I would advise you to do. Number one, don't be afraid to speak out. I'm glad there's so many people here today. I know that none of you is fearful of speaking out, but there are a lot of people who are scared of speaking out, particularly in Charlottesville, where there are repercussions. There are people here who don't like free speech if it's going against what they believe, and there are people along this very mall who told me 7 years ago when I was running for office, I really support you, I'd love to put your sign in my window, but I can't do it because I have to do business with City Hall. And they were under direct threat that, if you support anybody from the outside, that, there will be repercussions. They may be financial, they may be otherwise, but it's the fear that we live under in a place like Charlottesville. The way that changes is enough people are willing to step forward and speak out. Secondarily, I want you to think of, whenever you consider yourself at risk, I want you to think of the sacrifices that the people who actually put together the Constitution and the Bill of Rights faced, the things that they were up against when they decided to step out. And that was the penalty of death. I mean, many of them could have been killed immediately for their participation in this. And many people face death as a result of being a signatory or proposing some of these things. And so, when we contrast what we have to lose, it's really not that much. And I would say that any risk that we take in speaking out in this community or in this nation is certainly worth it, particularly when we look at young folks like over here Max and my son Gabriel and anybody else who think about their future. It's worth the risk to put yourself out on the line, and I encourage all of you to keep doing that. Thanks so much for being here today and for inviting me.